ready to kick off. This is Veteran ETA Roundtable Session 30, which is awesome that we've done 30 of these. Really appreciate everyone being here. First, a little housekeeping. None of this is legal advice. It's just a conversation for educational purposes. Really excited this evening to have kind of part two of the Tribe Equity Partners. Here we have Jordan Inman. Last week we had his partner James, and so just quick intro on Jordan. I know we talked about Tribe last session, but so just a little bit of background on Jordan. Jordan and his partner James acquired their first business in 2021, which is a janitorial company, and then in 2023 they officially formed Tribe Equity Partners with the goal of acquiring and operating small businesses while creating a direct path for military veterans to step into leadership roles. The firm focuses on companies generating around 1 million plus in EBITDA. Tribe has acquired multiple businesses, grown more than 100 employees across 5 states, and scaled an 8-figure holdco. Before entering the ETA space, Jordan served 7 years in the Marine Corps. In addition to the operating portfolio companies, they mentor transitioning veterans who want to become small business operators. So obviously, just in that background, this is such a perfect person to be speaking with. I really appreciate Jordan for your time and sharing all your insights. And as always, this is, meant to be more conversational for everyone. So please, I never ask any of the good questions. The good questions come from the group. So just write in the chat. I'm happy to moderate that, or just pop in there and talk. But I'll stop talking now and just kind of turn it over to you, Jordan, if you want to, add any of that intro, and then we can kind of get into some Q&A.
Right on. Thanks, Charlie. So first of all, I want to apologize for the big blank wall behind me. We had stolen artwork from our homes, and our wives were not happy about it. And so we had to remove the artwork from the wall and take it back. So we're in the process of getting some new artwork. Charlie kind of did the intro. I was in the Marine Corps. I joined 2007, 2008, and then I got out in 2015. Did 8 years as a infantry officer in the Marine Corps. Got out. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Kind of a poor example of the best way to transition. I just my wife and I ended up moving to Bend, Oregon, where we're at right now. And the reason we moved here was just because we wanted to raise our kids here. Ended up falling in as the operations guy for a very large family-owned production home builder called Hayden Homes here. Did that for about 8 years. It was not a good fit. Kind of couldn't stand it. James and I linked up somewhere in that process, and we bought our first company. And so we had that. I had that company on the side for a couple of years while holding down a full-time job. And if you guys don't know James, he was on this show, like, I don't know, a couple episodes ago. But kind of fast forward, we bought our first company, which was a janitorial company. That was a very standard acquisition. We found that was a brokered deal. We used the SBA. It was an 80-10-10 kind of structure. So that was our kind of first experience. And what I was going to talk to you guys today about was our second acquisition, which is Pacific Furs, was a lumber remanufacturing company here in kind of Central Oregon, which was a totally different experience for us because we decided to go kind of off market, not use a broker. We decided to do our own proprietary search. We didn't use an SBA loan for the second one. And so I was just going to kind of talk you through kind of how that went, and then open it up for some questions. So we had our first company, the janitorial company, which was growing and doing really well. We knew a few things that we didn't like about using a broker. And if you guys are searching and looking for kind of listed deals, one of the things that we found with a broker was there was kind of a middle person in the way, and it was really hard to build a relationship with the seller. So our second go around, we decided, why don't we just go direct to the source, try to find our own, company that's for sale and go that route. So we started our own kind of marketing campaign. We did everything you would probably think to do. We did cold outreach. We physically walked and knocked on doors and talked to people. We did cold emails. We specifically kind of targeted where we felt like a large portion of these business owners would kind of be. And so for us, we thought that would be kind of CPAs would have a large kind of network of these business owners who might be willing to sell. We focused on any kind of like wealth managers, legal kind of organizations around here that, you know, we figured that if somebody owns a small business, they probably need legal help from time to time. And that's kind of where our marketing went. It didn't necessarily go direct to business owners. We did a lot of that too. And we also offered a $50,000 finder's fee on the second go around. And so what we kind of advertised was if anybody found us an off-market deal that we closed on, we would write them a check for $50,000. A CPA actually brought us the deal that we ended up closing on, and we literally met that CPA at a bar over a beer, wrote him a $50,000 check, and slid it over to him, which is one of the cool experiences that we've had. But we ended up closing on a lumber remanufacturing company. What's kind of cool about this deal was it was 100% seller finance, which, you know, we never thought would be a thing or even possible. But the seller was so confident in his business and so confident in us that we ended up purchasing it and for a great deal. What we found in kind of the negotiations was the seller. What was important to him was actually not necessarily selling the business or the handoff of the business. That was important to him. But what we learned was what was important to him was he wanted to 1031 his real estate for tax purposes. And so where we landed was we offered to pay cash for his real estate that came with the business in exchange for him seller financing kind of the deal. And it turned out great. I think some of the lessons going that route, the seller had this thing listed for quite a while and nobody bid on it. The reason being is he had pretty clean books, but there was quite a bit of discretionary spend that, you know, kind of could be hard to prove. And when James and I looked at it, the first thing that stood out with the business was actually, it wasn't the business at all. It was the quality of the seller. And that's something that we talk about quite a bit. This seller was just maybe one of the best human beings that you'll ever run into. And so as we were kind of talking and getting to know him, we developed such a good relationship that we felt comfortable offering him, you know, kind of a full price offer. We submitted the LOI, and then the due diligence period, what we decided to do, because we had built such a great relationship, is we did due diligence together with the seller, which is something that's kind of outside the box. But up front, we said, hey, here's a list of everything we need. This week, we're going to look at, you know, credit cards and employee files. And so James and I would get that from the seller. We would look through it for a week, and we had a weekly 1-hour meeting with the seller. And then we would link up with him at the end of the week and say, hey, you know, we have questions on these 10 items. Can you explain? He would explain it. We would, you know, ask him if he had any questions. He got to ask questions like, why do we need that? Why is that important? And we would explain it to him. And then we got into this cadence where every single week we were meeting with the seller. We were chewing off another chunk of the due diligence process. And we became so confident in the seller that some of the hair that might be on the deal, because it, you know, there was a lot of spending on some of the things that were going on that were kind of personal spends, and it was kind of hard to prove that what, you know, the actual numbers were on the P&L. But we became so confident with the seller, and it turned out to be just a slam dunk. And we ended up buying the company. We've had it for 2 years now, and the company is killing it, and it's absolutely fantastic. We still have a great relationship with the seller. We meet with them, you know, quite often. We still talk on the phone, and it's been just a totally night and day different situation compared to buying through a broker. The broker, you know, we almost had our first deal killed a couple times because we would ask for stuff from the seller, and the seller, didn't understand why we needed it or what we were asking. And emotions would get high. And there's a couple times we thought we were at risk of losing the deal. So two totally different kind of ways to look at it. The second one was a little outside the box. And the second piece of that is because we couldn't prove some of the stuff on the financials, what we decided to do, good or bad, is we agreed to a 10-year note with the seller, but we also did kind of a 3-year royalty payment plan to him that was tethered to performance on the company. And he agreed to it because he was so confident in the company. We felt like that would protect us a little bit in case performance dropped or something was not true. It kind of de-risked us. In hindsight now, owning the business for 2 years, that was totally not necessary. We almost have the company, for the most part, it's almost paid off at this time because we kind of front-loaded so much in that royalty payment and kept him in the hook for kind of helping us out if we needed it. Once we closed, post-close was fairly typical. I think we had 3 months with the seller. They were there every day, and it was actually a great time because we were such good friends at that point. Didn't need the full 3 months, and he was able to kind of ride off into the sunset. Still on the phone every now and then, maybe once every couple of weeks I'll call just to check in, see how he's doing. Don't really need to ask any questions at this point, but just an absolutely fantastic experience. And I think the lesson is having clean financials is one thing, and everybody's going to always talk about the financials. But the seller is actually the most important thing in any business acquisition, because your success, you're just not going to be able to run a company as well as somebody who's owned that company for 30 years. And your success is directly dependent on your relationship with that seller. They can make or break you 100%. So as you guys are searching, just a food for thought is make sure you select not only the business, but you're selecting the seller to partner with, because it's a life-changing kind of opportunity.
That's terrific. Thanks so much, Jordan. And please, anyone, jump in here, but a couple questions on my end. As far as the financial literacy to kind of navigate that, I think it's such a cool story because it's different than a lot of things you hear, and it makes a lot of sense, the process that you guys used with the seller and kind of how you connected that with your rapport. But do you think you would have had the financial literacy and the comfortability to do that if you hadn't already been a business owner, or would you have wanted to do that with the first acquisition and get rid of the broker? Because I definitely understand a lot of the concerns you have with the brokers.
Yeah, and I to be honest with you, for me personally, the thing that intimidated me the most when we kind of got into business acquisition is I don't have a strong financial background. A lot of these terms were foreign to me. And so to answer your question, probably not. It really helped to have a business and be able to understand kind of what's going on. But I'll tell you, if you were a first-time searcher and you're like me, where that's like kind of intimidating, it is actually extremely simple. And all you have to do is find somebody who will talk you through it and help you out. And there's a million people out there. Even if you wanted to reach out to us, James and I would totally talk you through it and help you. Don't get intimidated by any of the financial aspect, because it is actually extremely simple. I think everything in small business ownership is simple when taken in small chunks. Where it gets intimidating is when you're looking at the whole package all together. But every step of the way is actually fairly simple if you take it in a bite-sized kind of piece. So yeah. And I will say that I think 9 out of 10 people would tell you that we were crazy for actually buying that business, because there was so much kind of discretionary spending hidden in different places that we couldn't necessarily prove. We felt like, pretty good at what we were looking at. But at the end of the day, you got to take a shot. And we had so much trust and confidence in the seller that it just wasn't a factor for us. We felt comfortable about assuming that risk, and that risk paid off extremely well.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As far as the jump to acquisition number two, and there's people on this call that are interested in kind of, they got their first acquisition, maybe they have, through the SBA. At what point, and kind of maybe talk us through the prep work it was where you felt like, okay, we're in a good, not that you have to use any specific numbers, but like where you felt like we're good. I mean, did you refi with the SBA? Did you just pay it off completely? What was kind of your thought process as to when to jump into acquisition number two?
Yeah, I will say that that's probably, it's going to be different for everybody. I will say if you don't own a business yet, I would say fully focus on that first business. I think personally you need a minimum of 6 months to a year in the driver's seat of that business. We didn't do that for our first business. We actually hired a GM from the start. We actually had jobs, and for years we ran that thing with hiring somebody else and having them run it. I would never recommend that to anybody. We pulled it off and it was great, but there were so many stressful nights, and we personally guaranteed something that we had no control over. It worked, but I would shy away from that. I highly recommend that you sit in the seat as the GM or the CEO for 6 months to a year, learn everything about that business. And then it's going to take you some time to find somebody who's super solid to run that company. That takes time, onboarding that individual, getting them trained up, getting them comfortable, finding your cadence on communication with that individual. That's going to take, another 6 months to maybe a year there, being conservative. And to be honest, I don't know that we'll ever be truly comfortable with any company, just because that's kind of the way we're wired.
Yeah.
But once we felt like we had a good grip on the business, we had really solid leadership in there. There's also two of us. So if something had happened in that first company, one of us could have jumped in and then the other could have taken on the second one. So that's a different dynamic as well. But with the second acquisition, I actually stepped in as the GM. I was the GM for almost a year, until we found our replacement, who's about 1,000 times better than I will ever be in the lumber industry. He's out there right now and he's absolutely crushing it, and he's a fantastic leader. And so we have kind of these two companies that are feeling really good, and we're able, total freedom of movement, and it's been awesome.
But that makes a lot of sense. As far as like just financially being viable to make another acquisition when you have existing SBA debt, how did you guys kind of think about that? Did you try to get rid of the SBA debt completely? Because obviously, like with a seller note, there's some priority over, if everything goes belly up, who's gonna get that money first, right? So how did you guys kind of set yourself up to be able to even make that jump?
So that's a good question. So a couple of things happened. First, when we bought the first company, interest rates were crazy low. I think it was like 5.25. I don't even know what it was, but it more than doubled within, I think, a year. We kind of saw that coming, so we actually refied. We found a hard money lender, and we just got out of the SBA altogether. And so we did that more so because we could see interest rates kind of going in a direction that we wanted to make sure that we didn't fall victim to. So we were able to lock something in that was a kind of a good deal for us. And then because we kind of had our day jobs going, we were able to take pretty much all the cash flow from the first acquisition and use that to leapfrog into the second acquisition.
Okay.
And then, we have stayed ultra lean. We're not like, doing anything crazy. And so now that nest egg, we have two amazing companies that are pumping out some cash flow for us. And now we can, right now what we're doing is we're partnering with other people who are searching and kicking them cash, doing equity investments ourselves in other people's businesses. But we can only do that because the snowball has kind of grown over time. And we definitely had to pay our dues at the beginning. It took plenty of long nights to get there.
That makes, yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense. And just talking to folks, it seems like understanding when's the right time to make that jump. It seems like you guys kind of, from what you're saying, stayed lean and made sure that you weren't getting over your skis until that second acquisition. So as far as, you mentioned the equity investing piece for folks on this call. What do you guys, and I know James hit on it a little bit, but kind of what do you look at as, when you're evaluating a deal and then a person, and kind of how do those two connect, and kind of what's like, the baseline, competency, and then where do you kind of look to those kind of those factors that are, more soft skills?
Yeah. So there's two qualities that we really look for. And the first is, there's a lot of people kicking tires right now. There's a lot of people talking about ETA or talking about a business, buying a business. A lot of people who talk about searching. You kind of got to be all in. We haven't seen really any success with people who are not all in. And the people who are all in, who have, they said, this is what I'm doing. They have a track record of, picking up the phone, making the calls, doing the work. They got the scars and the bruises from getting out there and embarrassing themselves in front of sellers, trying to pitch themselves, and they're actually grinding it out. That's the first thing we look for. We talk to, multiple people on a daily basis now. Most of them are kind of on the front end of their search. And it's you just got to jump in. You got to get dirty. You can't wait for a perfect plan. At some point you got to just jump in there, and you got to grind a little bit and do kind of the legwork to find a company. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is we really like to see some sort of track record of resilience. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a veteran. Veterans can show that because we all have a common kind of history of doing like deployments and all these things, and that's what builds our resilience. It's not necessarily somebody with an MBA. I personally don't think you need an MBA to buy a business. I think it's kind of overrated. Some people show resilience through losing a lot of weight or overcoming some, unfortunate obstacle. We were talking to a guy the other day who actually made an attempt to buy a business. He did it, and then the whole thing burned down, but he was back at it for round two. And that's like a respectable thing for us, is the people who don't quit. Because being a business owner is hard. There's so many ups and downs, and it is a difficult thing. And so we look for those two things. I think what makes James and I unique is we have no desire to be somebody who goes out there and just throws $50,000 checks or $100,000 checks at people and just hope that they stick and do something well. We have a very strong desire to just do, 4 or 5 partnerships a year and do like one up to $400,000 check. But we want to stand kind of side by side with those individuals, because I think the biggest thing personally that I've learned owning businesses now is that having a partner has been the best thing that has ever happened to me. James and I could have each individually bought our own company and we would have been totally fine at it. But when you're running a company and you're the GM, what we've done is one of us will be in Overwatch and one of us will be actually running the company. Having somebody to talk to who's in Overwatch, it just makes everything so much better. There's been so many times where I've gotten twisted on fairly simple things because I'm like looking at the problem, and James will come in and be like, hey, this is easy. Like, it's just this. And it's like, oh yeah. And there's been so many times where, we've had like some lows, people might quit or we might lose a customer. And when you have somebody to share that with, it's not as bad. And then also when we have huge wins, it's so much more fun to celebrate with somebody. And so if you're a searcher and you don't have a partner, James and I kind of want to come in and we want to be that for people who need it. We offer it's not just a financial piece, but we offer somebody who's been there and done that. We have all the templates and all the, you can get those anywhere. You can get the LOI templates and you can get the due diligence checklist and yada, yada, yada. But what you can't get is somebody sitting beside you on closing day and helping you rehearse your intro speech to your new team. You're not going to get somebody who's sitting next to you who's going to, fill you in on, hey, FYI, we've done the best job we possibly can, but accounts are still going to not work. The phone line's going to be messed up. Like, these are common things in the first 90 days. We're willing to fly out. And if you need somebody in the seat, like next to you, jumping in on QuickBooks or whatever it is, like, that's what we want to be, because it's just more fulfilling that way. We get to actually be a part of something and actually help somebody succeed as a CEO. And we also don't want huge stakes in anybody's company because, we think that the people who are personally guaranteeing something, taking on all the risk and doing all the legwork should get all the reward as well. And so we come in with a very small, we prefer, very small levels of equity investment, and we maximize our value by, dedicating every resource we have, which is us and our time, not just our money. And so to do that, we got to kind of stay small. If that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. I keep saying that. That makes perfect sense. But like a lot of things, I'm like, yes. That's awesome.
Yeah.
As far as where do you guys kind of? It's interesting to kind of watch your progression here. So I don't know if you could speak to, where you guys, when you sit down and have a kind of strategic discussion on where you want to see Tribe Equity Partners in the next 10 years. What does that look like, and kind of how does that, maybe I'd love to hear your take on the market and how you think ETA is, evolving and what that looks like for you guys.
Yeah. So we use EOS like everybody else on the planet. We do our annual and quarterly meetings. We do those for our companies and cast the vision and make sure that they're aligned with the strategy. And then at the tribe level, we do the same thing. So James and I will go, on a one-on-one retreat, might go like fly fishing or whatever it is. And then we spend ample time deciding what our annual goals are going to be, and then break those into quarterly goals. And then we do our own kind of version of EOS. So I will tell you, we started out initially just to buy one company, and we did that, and everything was great. And we got to a point where we're like, hey, we could buy a second company. So we did that, and everything was great. And then it got to a point, it's like, hey, what are we going to do with the extra cash we got? Okay, let's invest in other people and, help them grow. And so our goal this year is just to do that. So that's kind of the short horizon. Long term, we would love to have, this bullpen. The vision is to have a bullpen of heavy hitting CEOs. We're all friends, we're all buddies, we're all making, plenty of cash. And we have this network that's kind of unstoppable. We're all leaning on each other. And we're all just crushing and being leaders out in the community through small business ownership. To me, that's like, that's the ultimate kind of end point, is to be in this network of CEOs that are all heavy hitters and have, connections in every industry, and be a part of hopefully everybody's success. That would be very fulfilling to know that not only did we do a good job, but we helped other people as well.
That's great. Do you guys ever think about expanding, beyond the, Bend mid-sized? I live in Richmond, Virginia. Like, I'm a big fan of mid-sized cities. So I love that you guys were like, we're not going to go to a big city. We're going to buy some great businesses in Bend. Do you kind of still have like a regional vision for Tribe Equity?
Yeah. So if we acquire a company right now, it's going to be local. And that's because at the end of the day, we are leaders at heart, and we believe that you got to be present to kind of win. And you got to be present, and you got to be there. And so if we were to acquire a company somewhere else away from our families, it just wouldn't kind of fit that niche. But we are open, nationally to people all over the place who are trying to search and find their own business. We would invest in people anywhere. But for us, if we do acquire another business at this time, it's going to be local because, you know, want to kind of keep our money local, keep our just who we are, like our whole family's here. We believe in not only being a leader when you're in the military, but when I got out, everybody told me that, you know, I should think about getting into politics because it's a great place for veterans to go, and leadership doesn't die when you exit the military. And I believe in that, but I also believe that you know, leadership, small business ownership is the lifeblood of any community. You know, small businesses are what turn the cog, and you know, some of the strongest leaders I know are small business owners here in our local kind of network, and it's awesome. It's great. So
That's that. I definitely agree with you on that one. As far as, you know, I know you guys, part of the mission, I believe, is associated with kind of operators and putting operators in place. Could you maybe speak to, you know, say, I know I talked to a lot of people, and, you know, they have a great experience, but they have a couple kids, they got a good job. And so they're like, I want to do this. I hate corporate work, but I can't personally guarantee something right now, but I'd love to get out and maybe be a GM or operate, and kind of, I don't know what your exposure to that is, or maybe I know that you've done that previously, and what, you know, whether you think that that's a good kind of dipping your toe into this and see if you know, or I just love to get your insights on kind of that approach to ETA.
yeah, I think different people are going to give you a different response to that question. Me personally, I think you got to burn the boats in life. You have to make up your mind, and if you want to be a CEO of a business, you just got to go in and go for it.
Yeah.
And don't look back. We see so many people who have an out, or they have a plan B, or they just kind of have the safety net, and they don't necessarily go all in because those things exist. I've been there before. You know, I was in a corporate environment, great company, great people. It just was not for me, and I was internally eating myself up. When we bought our first company, I was going to Harvard Business School through their executive education program. I had 2 kids, kind of back to back in that window, and we acquired our first company while having a full-time, like I was the operations guy for a 2,000 home a year home building company. It was like a cubic butt ton of stuff on my plate. But, you know, you just kind of got to decide and not let any circumstances stop you. And it was extremely hard. It was terrifying at times. But it has been, you know, the most rewarding. I can't speak enough about how fortunate James and I have been. I pinch myself sometimes. I'm like, it just feels like we're living in a dream. And there's no way I would ever change anything. But it just, you know, it hasn't been smooth. And if you're in a rocky spot, you think you want to do it. I mean, I think you just got to go. I think you got to listen to what's going on inside of you, and you just got to pull the trigger and go for it. You only get one life. And, you know, having an epic story on the back end, but failing is better than having a boring story on the back end and never taking the shot, in my opinion.
That's great advice. As far as, and I know we started this call with the lack of artwork in the back and the wives making the call on that. You know, I don't know if you guys could speak to it. I don't know, talking about James and you, it seems like though things are tough, you guys have always been very unified in like this kind of like, we're going to just keep moving forward and keep taking our hits and just keep trugging along. And I don't know if, you know, if you could speak to kind of the family dynamics and, you know, what that takes on like a whole person, whole family scale to kind of get that done.
Yeah, so I did it the wrong way. I always do it the wrong way. So I will tell you what not to do. If you're going to jump in and go all in and buy a company and become a CEO, you got to treat it like a mini deployment. Like you're literally going to be grinding from sun up to sundown for about 6 months. We think that that's kind of the right way to do it. You won't feel truly comfortable until about a year in, maybe even a year and a half. And it just takes time and all your effort. And you got to think about what that means for your family. You know, making sure if you have a spouse, making sure your spouse understands like the undertaking that's about to happen, what it means for the family, from a financial aspect, what it can do for you guys' futures, but also, you know, what kind of the requirements are when you jump into this thing. You know, it can be really difficult if your spouse kind of doesn't understand and they kind of think it's like, oh, it's just like a different job, but it's still just like kind of this normal job. Because it's not. Like, you know, we were working nights, mornings, weekends, all holidays. For Pacific Furs, we bought that. I actually put a tent on the back of my truck. I slept on site 1 day a week because it was a 45-minute drive from the house. So I camped in a dirt lot on this company that we had just bought, and that allowed me to go, you know, all night, and I could get up early and keep grinding. And that was just part of the sacrifice that it felt like had to be done to make that thing happen. Because it is a grind, it's a huge lift. With the kids, you know, depending on how old your kids are, you know, it's an impact on them. But the impact for me and my family is my son is 11. And when he doesn't have school, like he comes with me now. So he's with me all the time. He'll go to our quarterly meetings. He's actually built some of our slides. He'll present times, which I find is one of the most rewarding and fulfilling things as a father. You know, they're running around. In the summer, if he wants to make some extra cash, he'll be cleaning toilets at the janitorial company or windows, or, you know, he'll be out at the mill picking up trash, pulling weeds. You know, it's been a huge benefit at the end of the day, but that first 6 months is rough.
Yeah, and I'm sure you know, you make your own schedule, all those things that kind of allow you now to you know, be fully integrated with your family. But I think that's you don't hear that enough. People talk about, you know, you know, the exits and stuff, but I can't imagine the sacrifice on the front end.
Yeah, it's big, and it's okay. I think a lot of people are successful and they don't act like it was hard or they were scared. Like, I still, you know, have these moments where I wake up at night in a cold sweat and I'm like, what have I done? And then, you know, the next night I'll wake up and I'll be like, oh, I'm a, you know, business genius. Like, you know, I'm you know, killing it. And it's constant. And that's another reason to have a partner or somebody to have as a sounding board. Because it is, you know, it's daunting. You're personally guaranteeing everything. You're betting on yourself, and you're going all in. And you know, it's all the emotions in one bag. So
it makes a lot of sense. All right, well, we're kind of getting to time here, so, you know, I'll kind of leave it to you, Jordan, if you have any kind of parting words. Thank you so much for your time. And, you know, we'll be sharing this with the whole community. There's, you know, hundreds of folks on this listserv. So excited for everyone to kind of get this content and then be able to connect with you and James, because I just think what you guys are doing for the community, ETA, and then just the veteran community specifically is exactly why I like working in this space, because I think veterans have a lot to offer. And I think the way you guys go about business is just exactly, you know, what people need from you know, from a mentorship perspective. So thank you so much for what you're doing and for your time.
yeah, I mean, thank you, Charlie. You know, you're a classic example of somebody who's going above and beyond. You have your own stuff on your own plate, and you're taking time to take care of veterans. I actually signed up to listen to these before I think we acquired our first company, maybe, and was just a fly on the wall initially. Time has kind of gotten sparse, so, you know, I don't jump in that much, but you know, you have more of an impact than I think you might know. And if there's anything that we can do for you, let us know. We're, you know, fully in support, and we appreciate it. It's an honor to be able to come on and just talk with veterans.
Thanks, man. All right. Well, I will be sharing your guys' you know, contact info, and appreciate again your time, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.